Long in that first stint. Can you talk us through the strategy and how that race unfolded from your perspective?
It was a pretty lonely race. I didn't have anyone really around me. Had a fairly decent start considering I was on the hard tyre. It was quite a bit of warm-up on that tyre the first few laps, and really hard to keep up with everyone that's on the mediums. Went as long as I could, but I mean generally didn't have the pace of Mercedes, for example, or the guys any guys that are up ahead of me. So it's pretty straightforward.
Start of a triple header, of course. Where do you feel you stand with this Ferrari package now? Did you learn quite a lot this weekend again?
Yeah, I think it looks like we are third. So it's Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, and then that sort of thing. So we got some improvements to make.
Is Lewis Hamilton resigned and frustrated with his new team? Something isn't right. What seemed like the beginning of a golden era at Ferrari has turned into a nightmare of technical errors, controversial decisions, and a car that simply doesn't respond. Stay until the end because today I'm going to tell you the full truth behind Hamilton's difficult start at Ferrari, including what no one is saying about his disqualification in China. Also, I invite you to leave your opinion in the comments. Do you think Hamilton can still fight for the championship in 2025 with this Ferrari? Or was it a mistake to leave Mercedes? When Lewis Hamilton's arrival at Ferrari for the 2025 season was confirmed, the world of Formula One experienced one of its most shocking moments of the last decade. It wasn't just the most successful driver currently operating on the team that was changing teams. It was a symbol. Hamilton, 7-time world champion, left Mercedes after more than a decade of success, podium finishes, and absolute dominance of the sport to join the most historic team in the paddock. Expectations were colossal. Ferrari, a brand synonymous with passion and glory, and Hamilton, a driver who has always sought to push his own limits, sealed an alliance that many believed would break Red Bull's hegemony and return the prancing horse to the world championship throne. During the winter break, every gesture, every test, every statement related to Hamilton and Ferrari was analyzed in detail. The images of the Briton dressed in red, waving to the fans, adapting to the new environment at Maranello, conveyed a narrative of reinvention, of new beginnings. Even in pre-season, although the lap times weren't exceptional, the general atmosphere was one of restrained optimism. There was talk of a car with good potential in qualifying, although with doubts on long runs. But the most important thing was that Ferrari seemed to have gained something it was lacking: leadership, experience, and above all, a winning mentality. The reality, however, was very different when the season began. From the inaugural Grand Prix in Australia, the SF25 showed significant limitations. Hamilton struggled with a car that didn't respond as expected, especially in terms of aerodynamic balance and rear stability. Despite his effort and experience, he finished in a modest 8th place. It wasn't the debut he or the fans had hoped for. And although there were glimmers of hope in qualifying, especially on high downforce circuits, the car didn't have enough race pace to compete on equal terms with McLaren, Mercedes, or Verstappen's mighty Red Bull. What was initially sold as a rebirth for both sides began to transform into a tale of frustration. Hamilton looked compromised, yes, but also clearly uncomfortable. Not for lack of motivation, but because he knows he doesn't have the necessary equipment to compete for what he came for: his 8th world championship. Every weekend seems like an uphill battle. And the most alarming thing is that, from within the team, they've begun to admit they don't fully understand why the car isn't performing as planned. The lack of correlation between the simulator, wind tunnel, and track is a specter that reappears as in times past. So that change of scenery that promised to be the biggest gamble of the year has become, at least for now, a painful mystery. Hamilton arrived hungry, with energy, with the idea of building something great with Ferrari. But what he's found is a team that, no matter how hard it tries, still can't give him the tools to compete with the best. And the most worrying thing is that the races keep moving forward and the mistakes don't stop. In Formula One, time is relentless. And if Ferrari doesn't react soon, this red dream could become one of the great disappointments of the modern era. The 2025 Japanese Grand Prix wasn't just another race for Lewis Hamilton. Suzuka, a technical, fast, and demanding circuit, became the perfect setting to lay bare Ferrari's structural problems. And for the 7-time world champion to break his silence with one of his most blunt statements since donning the red suit. This wasn't just any old complaint. It was a calculated, clear, and painfully honest message. One that made it clear that things at Maranello are far from under control. Hamilton's race was, in his own words, pretty lonely. He started from 8th place and finished 7th, without having a single real chance of fighting for the front positions. He put it bluntly, he simply didn't have the pace to keep up with the McLarens, the Mercedes, or, of course, the Red Bull. What was truly alarming about this comment wasn't just the acknowledgement of technical inferiority, but the resignation in his tone. A driver like Hamilton isn't used to racing without clear goals, without a fight, without that spark that defines the greats. For him to say that he felt unequipped to compete is a warning sign for all of Ferrari. But the most significant admission came later, when he publicly admitted that his car has been suffering from a technical problem for the past 3 Grands Prix. And we're not talking about a minor detail. Hamilton revealed that he is losing more than a tenth per lap due to a defect that has yet to be precisely identified. That, in the context of modern Formula One, is an eternity. A tenth can mean the difference between being on the second row or stuck in Q2, between having clean air or spending half the race stuck in traffic. And the most worrying thing is that Ferrari still doesn't know what's causing this loss. A solution seems to be on the way with a new part that will be installed soon, but so far these are more suppositions than certainties. Furthermore, the weekend at Suzuka revealed another disturbing fact. For the first time this season, Hamilton and Leclerc took completely different paths regarding setup. This, while it might seem like a logical tactic to find new solutions, also shows that the team is testing in the dark, desperately searching for answers. While Leclerc achieved a respectable 4th place in qualifying, Hamilton finished 8th, and during the race he particularly struggled with the front end of the car. The feeling of disconnection with the car was so clear that not even the Britain's natural talent could compensate for it. These kinds of situations can break the morale of any driver, but even more so for someone who came to Ferrari with the idea of building something great, of closing his career with an 8th title, of making history. The harsh reality of Suzuka showed a committed Hamilton, yes, but also frustrated and, at times, resigned. His words were a wake-up call not only for his team, but also for everyone at Ferrari. You can't build a winning project if a new problem arises every weekend, if technical decisions generate more doubts than solutions, if the driver can't trust the material at hand. Suzuka was more than a race. It was a snapshot of Ferrari's current situation. And at the center of that image is Hamilton, a champion who no longer has time to waste. If Ferrari doesn't resolve this technical crisis quickly, the dream of seeing the Briton lift a title with the Cavallino could vanish much sooner than expected. What happened at the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix was more than just a disqualification. It was a public humiliation for Ferrari. An incident that not only compromised the points earned on the track, but also brutally exposed the structural, technical, and strategic shortcomings of a team that aims to compete for championships, but continues to make basic errors unbecoming of a team of its stature. What happened in Shanghai is the starkest reflection of a team that, despite having 2 of the best drivers on the grid, still cannot guarantee them the minimum conditions to compete at the highest level. Everything seemed poised for a positive weekend for the Maranello team. Lewis Hamilton had shown on Saturday in the sprint race, winning authoritatively and finally showing signs that the SF25 could deliver the necessary performance when conditions were optimal. Charles Leclerc, despite having an incident at the start of the main GP with damage to his front wing, managed to recover and finished in 5th place. Hamilton, meanwhile, crossed the finish line in 6th. In terms of points, it was a very valuable result for a team that had been struggling since Australia. But the joy was short-lived. Hours after the race ended, the FIA announced that both Ferraris had been disqualified following technical inspections. The reason? Clear and conclusive violations. In Leclerc's case, the car was found to be under the minimum weight requirement. In Hamilton's case, the problem was even more serious. The skid plate on his car's floor, the famous plank, showed wear greater than that allowed by the regulations. Specifically, the plank on Hamilton's car had been eroded beyond the minimum limit of 9 mm, 8.6 mm on the left, 8.6 mm in the center, and 8.5 mm on the right. A direct violation of a key technical rule. Ferrari accepted the penalty without appeal. There were no excuses. This wasn't a gray area of the regulations or an ambiguous interpretation. It was a pure and simple setup error. What makes matters worse is that, according to internal sources, Ferrari lacked the necessary data on the SF25's behavior in dry race conditions with Hamilton. During pre-season testing in Bahrain, the Britain's car suffered a technical problem that prevented a full race simulation from being completed. This meant that the team entered the first part of the championship with serious gaps in terms of real-world information on the car's behavior under prolonged loads. And the worst part wasn't just the error itself, but the consequences it had. The disqualifications not only cost them valuable points, they also generated a wave of criticism and jeopardized Ferrari's image of professionalism. Team principal Fred Vasseur couldn't hide his frustration. While he didn't lash out publicly, his message was clear. These are unacceptable failures for a team that wants to contend with championships. And he was right. A structure like Ferrari, with so many human and technological resources, cannot be allowed to fail in something as fundamental as managing the car's ride height or final weight. As if all this weren't enough, the controversy escalated when it was discovered that FOM, responsible for the television broadcast, had biasedly edited the radio conversation between Hamilton and his engineer, showing only the part where the Briton seemed to defy team orders. What was omitted was that he himself had previously suggested letting Leclerc pass, aware that he didn't have enough pace to keep him behind. This manipulation of the narrative only served to create an even more chaotic picture of what was happening in the Red Garage. The Chinese GP didn't just take points away from Ferrari. It took away credibility. It took away internal stability. And above all, it robbed Hamilton of the chance to consolidate a comeback start to his season. Because if one thing is clear, it's that when the car is up to scratch, Lewis remains one of the best drivers in the world. But if Ferrari keeps stumbling over the same stone, that competitive spark could fade before they manage to correct course. What happened in Shanghai is a warning, not just for Ferrari. It's a warning for the entire technical structure, for the internal processes, and for the way decisions are made. If they want to fight for titles, it's not enough to have great drivers. They urgently need to be a truly great team. Because in Formula One, mistakes are unforgivable, much less two on the same Sunday. Lewis Hamilton's story at Ferrari, at least up to this point in the 2025 season, is anything but the redemption narrative many imagined when his arrival was confirmed. What began as one of the most promising partnerships of the modern era of Formula One has transformed into a tense tale, filled with technical challenges, controversial decisions, and pressure that mounts race after race. The most painful thing is that, despite having one of the most talented and experienced drivers of all time, Ferrari has once again demonstrated that its problems go far beyond talent in the cockpit. The combination of a devastating disqualification in China, frustrated statements in Japan, and a series of strategic errors that have compromised the start of the season have not only affected Hamilton's performance on the track, but also the public perception of Ferrari's ability to build a truly competitive car. In a series where margins are measured in thousandths of a second and every technical decision has a direct impact on the result, there is no room for improvisation or for basic errors like those made so far. But beyond the results, what this situation leaves us with is a reflection of Hamilton's character. Despite everything, he has remained firm, honest, and still committed to the project. His criticism has been constructive, his complaints justified, and his patience, although tested, remains intact. This attitude speaks to a driver who still believes in the possibility of turning things around. Because if Hamilton has demonstrated anything throughout his career, it's that he never gives up. Not when he's motivated, not when he still sees potential in the team he represents. However, we must also understand an inescapable reality. Time is not on Ferrari's side. This season, he faces stronger rivals than ever. McLaren has made an impressive step forward. Mercedes has recovered some lost ground, and Red Bull, despite its internal problems, remains the benchmark. If Ferrari doesn't react quickly and effectively, the championship train could slip away before the calendar even reaches its halfway point. And with that, Hamilton's real chances of achieving that historic 8th title could quietly vanish. The big question now is whether Ferrari can rise to the challenge. Can it solve its technical issues, optimize its strategy, and offer Hamilton a car worthy of his talent? Or will this season remain just another in the long list of unfulfilled promises from the Maranello team? Only time will tell. But what is clear is that motorsports fans, the true fans of Formula One, don't want to see a champion like Hamilton dragging himself along in the midfield. They want to see him in his natural habitat, fighting at the front, risking everything for a victory, making history lap after lap. So if you too want to see how this story unfolds, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay tuned, because what comes next will be decisive not only for Hamilton, but for Ferrari's legacy in this new era of Formula One.